This episode is brought to you by the Sasquatch Flag Company. The Sasquatch Flag Company is a family-owned business in New England that builds hand-carved American flags from seasoned white pine. Each flag is hand-built and each star on the flag is hand-hammered and chiseled. No two flags are alike. They offer a variety of flag designs to honor the police, military, firefighters, dispatchers, and search and rescue personnel, to name a few. These stunning handmade flags look great in an office, a studio, the back porch, or above the fireplace mantle. They make the perfect gift for the veteran, first responder, or patriot in your life. Now, I love these flags, and I've been giving them as gifts for years, and I was a customer long before they became a sponsor of the show. I can't recommend them enough. So if you're looking for that perfect, uniquely American-made gift to give away, or if you want to treat yourself, go to sasquatchflags.com and get your order in today. Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Susan Freeman. Susan is an executive coach, team coach, author, speaker, and leadership consultant. She brings more than 3 decades of corporate, entrepreneurial, and nonprofit leadership experience to her clients. Susan is the author of a brand new book called Inner Switch: 7 Timeless Principles to Transform Modern Leadership. And I'm excited to have her on the show to talk about how we can access our inner switch to become more effective as leaders. So Susan, welcome to the show.
It's delightful to be here. Thanks so much for having me, John.
Hey, I'm really excited about this book. Congratulations. It's been out for 2 weeks now. And it's just a great topic. And I'm excited to talk about it because I want to learn more about this inner switch that we all have. So, but to start off, one of the things I was, doing research, looking at your background, and you say that you've been studying yoga for more than 25 years. And I was wondering how much of that influences the way you teach and coach leaders, because I know it has a big impact in this book.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the honest truth is that it depends. Right? So I utilize a lot of the experiences and principles in the book with clients that I believe are open and are willing and able to go to those places because they have demonstrated a curiosity and they get permission. And there are clients for whom that is perhaps less engaging and less interesting.
I see.
And therefore, I do not impart anything onto anyone who isn't interested and open and curious. It's available. And with many people, it's not where they wish to start initially. And so we meet people where they are. I think that's the most important thing. I'm not prescriptive with my work with folks. I just listen deeply, I connect, and I try to meet people. I do meet people where they are and offering them that sort of next thing that's going to assist them in moving forward in their leadership journey.
Okay. And in some cases, you will take ideas from yoga and you'll introduce it to clients.
Well, the principles of the book are sort of part of me, right?
Yeah.
This came out of a deep experience, as you know. So it's not that I can separate myself from it. It's just the question of the timing. So when or if might I apply it in the coaching journey with a client or a team? And always it's important to get permission, to ask people, are you open to trying something new?
Yes.
Are you open to trying something that's a little bit off-label, right? And I discovered in the book, as I describe in the book, that most people that I have worked with are much more open than I might have imagined. They're really hungry for some of the things that the book offers, and they don't know what to ask.
Yes. Yeah. I love it. Okay. That's great. I mean, again, we talk about that here on the show, that leadership isn't a one size fits all. You have to find out what motivates your team members, and you have to work to customize your approach to every individual. And it sounds like you do that in your coaching practice as well.
Well, that's the hallmark of good coaching, always, right?
Absolutely.
It's always driven by the client agenda, the client pacing, the client overall objectives, intentions, goals. I mean, good coaching is never the coach leading or having an agenda.
Yep, exactly. Good leadership too.
Yeah.
So talk about what are some of the challenges that leaders are facing in the work environment today. We're coming off a pandemic. It seems like the news, the pace of change seems to be increasing faster and faster. What are some of the things that leaders are facing today, and what are some of the challenges for them as they're facing these environmental shifts?
Yeah, such a great question. My answer is, what are they not facing? What are they not facing? They
Right.
are literally, we are creating a new world order right now. So we're in the VUCA period, having accelerated volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. The pandemic just put the imprimatur on that, because what we were told in 2019 could never happen and was not possible, 7 days into the pandemic, it was happening. And so everyone had to adjust. Organizations, leaders went from in-person to virtual, went to leading teams virtually. And now, as we know, there is quite a bit of a tectonic shift with respect to wanting, some of the senior leaders of the older generations want to get people back into the office full time. And most people are resisting that. And they don't want to go back because they've now tasted a different way of living and blending their work and their lives. And quite frankly, it worked for them, particularly for the female leaders who are really struggling with oftentimes being the primary caregivers for children, as well as caretakers for aging parents. And having this ability to work remotely and to be flexible is extremely important for your talented female leaders. So I think we're seeing this resistance playing out. And I think from what I'm reading, and I read on this topic every single day, I'm listening deeply. I think that the employees are going to win this battle. I think that we are going to be in hybrid.
Yeah.
I think we will never go back to 5 days a week again, but for the rarest of organizations, we'll be able to do that. I think we'll be more into a hybrid model, which will be a few days a week in office, bulk of the time being able to work from home or from anywhere. And in order to attract top talent, this is what the younger generations are now asking for. If you have millennials or Gen Z employees or kids, you will know that they are not going to follow in the steps of their boomer or their Gen X parents. They are just not. So they are basically controlling the agenda with respect to how they're going to work and lead and what they are willing to do as a result. So that's the first thing. The second thing is climate change impacting everyone in every aspect of how we're leading and living, which is causing a great migration. It's causing people to question a lot of the values and the things that they used to focus on. So that's what leaders are focused on. And then there's also this intensive experience of globalization, where there is a 24/7 connectedness, where people are working with colleagues all over the world, myself included, working across multiple time zones, collaborating and co-creating. And so this is putting a lot more emphasis on these relationships being very, very strong, because you're not necessarily only working with people in your physical location. You've got to have the ability to transcend that. And the last thing, and maybe even the biggest thing of all, is artificial intelligence, which we are now observing. After 2 months, it went from 0 to 100 million users. It's the fastest adoption rate of any technology in the history of the world. So we know that that's going to disrupt our workplaces. It's going to disrupt our workforce. We just don't yet know how quickly, but we know it's going to happen. And so the competencies and skills, the relational skills, the listening skills, the presence skills, the energetic skills that I'm trying to communicate in Inner Switch are the things that are going to distinguish the most effective leaders from those that get left behind.
Well, that's good, because that's what we need. And I think you're right. The leaders are facing an onslaught of environmental shifts, changes at a pace, like I said, it's faster than any time before. We just sort of got used to, oh, there's a pandemic, and we adjusted to that, and then we sort of got out of that, and now we're facing, AI. Globalization continues to increase, and it's on the rise. The increase in the use of technology, and how, like you say, borders are there. It's not that important anymore. These Zoom conversations are just a natural way of life, and it's just interesting. And so, yeah, leaders have to deal with more, and of course, it leads to more stress, more anxiety, more problems, because you're trying to get a job done with employees that want to work from home, and it's a whole a mix of things that you have to deal with that you didn't have to deal with even just 10 years ago. So it's
Yes.
definitely a monumental shift in difficulties. Like, we ratcheted up the level of difficulty for
Yes.
leaders, and so that creates a lot of problems with leadership, anxiety, depression, just a lot of things that we deal with. So that's why I think it's really interesting about this book in particular, because we're going to talk about it. We're going to get into our inner selves here and learn how to sort of combat some of those challenges from the outside. So let me ask you. So one of the things you say, and I really like this, you say that post-pandemic, there's a shift to a more humanistic, holistic workplace and a renewed emphasis on people as much as profit. And how do you think that's the case? And I do feel that, but I also worry that it might be temporary. So do you think it's a permanent shift where
I share your concern.
Priority?
I truly share your concern. I mean, what we're seeing is that mental health burnout is now. I have some statistics on that I pulled last week for a webinar that I was giving. That mental health is impacting engagement. 50% of leaders that were surveyed in an NIMH survey believe that. Anxiety is now being experienced by 42.5 million people. And holistic well-being is now considered to be the top leadership challenge. 53% of leaders polled in a National Institute of Mental Health survey said that holistic well-being was a top leadership challenge. 42% of US workers say they feel burnout. So 68% have had to take time off of work because of mental health problems. And 2/3 have experienced work-induced mental health problems at work. All right, these statistics are staggering. So what this is telling us, and these are current statistics, this study was done in February of 2023, they're telling us that we've got a problem, Houston. So I think that the companies that are leading initiatives and putting real effort and energy behind quality programs and initiatives to address burnout, to address employee mental well-being, to address anxiety, and showing and demonstrating that they care deeply about giving their employees new tools, new approaches, new ways of how do we cope with these changes, right? Don't just tell us to do it. Give us tools, help us get there, provide a supportive environment so that we can grow and flourish. The organizations that are doing that are going to leave everybody else in the dust. And there are a lot of them that are talking about it and it's only lip service. I agree with you. But I think in the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to see the ones that are really transforming are going to be able to attract and retain the talent. So it's going to be I think, the rubber's going to meet the road and whether they're doing it well or not, depending upon how many people decide to stay and work there.
Well, if we can make a shift to people over profits, or at least profits are important, but people are as well, that would be a big step up, I think, for a lot of companies, because we tend to put profit, and shareholder value over just about anything. And it has been good stuff lately happening with, what I call stakeholder value. So stakeholders are being a lot more vocal, whether it's customers with boycotting, whether employees protesting, whether shareholders saying, hey, you said you were supposed to live up to these values and you didn't. So I think stakeholders are getting a little bit more say in companies than they did maybe even in 5 years ago. So I'm seeing a lot more stakeholder involvement. And so that gives me hope that maybe it's not just going to be all about profits. It's going to be about living up to the principles that you formed your company over, and not just profits. I'm hopeful, like you.
It's very, very well said. And I think that's while we're on this topic of stakeholder, I think that one of the things that we do as team coaches is we try to bring all the stakeholders into the conversation, even if they're not physically present. But we ask our leadership teams to really bring the voices of the past, the present, and the future into the discussions and the planning and the strategic initiatives, so that we are thoughtfully and intentionally creating what it is that we know is going to serve. not just reacting to what is happening. And that is a very different approach, I think. And I really value and appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, that is the right way to do it, I think. So let's dive into the book. So what is the inner switch?
Yeah. So the inner switch is the capacity to be able to combine the notion of thinking and doing, which is what we all know how to do really well in our society, with the capacity to feel and be. So being able to learn how to blend and activate this polarity, to be able to act and think and do in the world while also feeling and being, not detaching one's heart and gut and being from the way in which we show up, from the way in which we communicate, and from the way in which we choose to respond in any given situation. When we have made the inner switch, we energetically transmit entirely differently to others than we do if we have not yet made the switch. And people feel that, and they engage with that, and they collaborate and co-create, they innovate, they do their best work. So if we really want to take our teams and organizations to an entirely new level, I believe that the inner switch is the most potent and valuable pathway to transform our organizations.
This is powerful. So you're saying, in essence, bringing your whole self to work, bringing not just your
self.
Yeah. So you're bringing your emotions. You're going to bring your all of who you are to the table versus just putting on a face. I'm just here at work. I'm in work mode, and then I go home and I'm in family mode. I might, go out into the community. I'm in community mode. You're saying bring your whole self to work, which is something I've always, as a leader, wanted my employees to do. Bring your whole self to work. I want your whole self here. I want you to be, I want you to be at a place where you love coming to work every day. Maybe it's a hard day's work, but you enjoy being here, and you enjoy your friends, and you enjoy the things that we're doing because it matches what you want to do in the world, right? And it matches your dreams and passions. And if you can do that, typically you have happier employees when they're doing things that they love doing. So this is interesting. This is good. So turning that switch and bringing your whole self. So I love this. You say that leaders, when they draw their attention inwards, and they can transform their working relationships and get more effective response from employees. So you're saying part of this is going in and then it comes out, right? Is that generally the description of what's happening?
You can only be in the external world that which you already first experience within.
Okay.
So rather than attempting to try to change others, I tend to believe that when we focus on our own inner experience first and then show up with others, we clear ourselves first and then we engage, what we're able to create is an entirely different conversation than the other way. And we've all seen this. We've all experienced it. We've been on the receiving end of leaders in our careers where somebody has come and just talked at us, and they have made it about them offloading something from their shoulders onto us, or lobbed it, worse yet, lobbed it over in an email, right? And we know what that feels like, and we know that that doesn't promote engagement. It doesn't promote responsiveness. It promotes reactivity. And what you and I know, have seen throughout our careers is a lot of very reactive people. Yeah. And so the inner switch is about getting beyond this reactivity. It's understanding how our brains and bodies actually work, so that you can learn and choose a different path. And that when you engage with others, you are responsive and not reactive. And that makes all the difference to achieving any goal or objective that you have as a leader.
I really think it's an important aspect. It's one area that's in the book, and I was going to ask you about that. This idea of not being reactive, but being responsive, and be able to respond to it versus react. And I think, as I observed leaders over, my corporate career, there was a lot of leaders that was just completely reactionary, sort of like a like a dog that, you come into the yard and they bark, and it just was reacting to bad news, or when somebody didn't perform to expectations. And so it was always the barking dog, and it was always a reaction. And I think that's, and we do that when we're busy. We do that when we're stressed. We do that when, we've got a lot on our mind. We just react to problems. And I saw that a lot. And I think the better leaders are the ones that, can take time to reflect and respond in a proper manner. In other words, taking that difference. You say in the book that the body is the gateway to transform from reactive to responsive. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So I was just asking you to tell us a little bit about the body, because I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Well, this all comes from yoga, right? So we have the autonomic nervous system consists of two components. One is the sympathetic, the other is the parasympathetic. When we are awake and at work, we are typically using our parasympathetic nervous system. That's the thinking and doing part, where our brains are conscious. We're using supposedly rational thinking. We're in beta brainwave. Yeah. And so that's how we show up to get stuff done in the world. But what's the problem with that? The problem is the other half of our nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, is never invited in the conversation. The parasympathetic is the part of our nervous system that is the feeling and being part. It's the part that engages when we are deeply relaxed, and it can be engaged when we are conscious and awake. It will promote alpha. It shows up with alpha brainwaves, and if we're an advanced meditator, perhaps delta and even theta brainwaves. The capacity to be able to engage in being deeply relaxed while being conscious and awake is where the magic juju is. Because what's happening is when we are deeply relaxed and we have activated that parasympathetic nervous system, the amygdala cannot be hijacked. And what you've described, that conflict creating, stress inducing reactive struggle that many, many, many people go through, and we're all busy, right? And most of us are always stressed, right? When you retrain your body to know how to enter that state like this quickly, what happens is no matter how externally triggering the event is, you are not going to react. You are going to respond. And that is going to transform your relationships. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. This is not something you can think about and then make it happen. It is an embodied practice. So I give a lot of exercises in the book to help people who might not ever get on a yoga mat to have a taste of this, to experience this for themselves, so that they can feel it. Because once they feel it, they've got it. Then it's just a question of practicing and retraining the brain and body, rewiring the neural programming. So that this becomes the way in which we engage in the world. And that is the practice.
I love that. And I know from an outward standpoint, I know just in my experience as a leader, your people reflect your mood. And so if you're always reacting to everything around you, your people are all walking on eggshells, and they're all nervous, and don't tell them, because they're worried that, the way the boss is going to react to the situation. But if you're calm in the face of, bad news and information that's not, good for the business and what have you, but you're able to sort of think through it, respond versus react. I think the team sort of, it's like a parent always yelling at a child for every little thing they do. It creates a lot of stress versus, sitting the child down and saying, okay, why are you doing this, versus, so it's having that response. And I think it creates a better mood overall in the organization when the boss isn't just flying off the handle for every little thing that happens.
Yeah, beautifully said. I mean, this is, it all starts with you. If you're the leader of an enterprise or of a team, it all starts with you. They are going to pick up on and feel your energy. And I give case histories in the book of CEOs and COOs and people that I've coached where that exact experience happened for them. where
Yeah.
they would come into the office, they'd be highly reactive. Everybody on the team would feel it. What happened
Yeah.
today? And then, like, we begin doing this work together, and they're now describing in their own words the dramatic shift in how people are engaging with them from the first steps into the office. And
Uh,
so that's why I say it really is an inner switch. It isn't about what you say when you go into the room or about what you say when you walk into the office. It's about also configuring who are you being and how are you being
yeah.
and what are you feeling and what's getting in the way of you showing up as your best leader today. Because if
Yeah.
you can't clear that for yourself before you show up in a team meeting, you're not going to have a very productive meeting.
So powerfully said. I agree. One thing you talk about in the book, and I thought it was interesting. It's this idea we're always chasing work-life balance, and so it's essentially we feel like well, there's this we can reach nirvana, we have perfect work-life balance, and it never seems to happen. You have a different view on work-life balance, and I thought it would be interesting to share your thoughts on the idea of work-life balance and what it really should look like.
Yeah. Well, this is probably the most asked question of anyone in our world today, right? How
Yeah.
do I get this proverbial work-life balance thing working? And I think my belief is that it's the language that we're using that is creating part of the problem.
Yeah.
You see, there aren't two lives. We don't
That's
have
it.
a life at work and a
Yes.
life at home.
Yes.
Our way of being when we live and we work is the same.
Yes.
So the root cause of the distress or the perception that we are not balanced is that we are often not integrated within ourselves at all. We're not integrated. So therefore, we show up at work as disintegrated and we show up at home as disintegrated. Therefore, our experience in our lives is one that lacks integration. The balance is already there when we are integrated. So for example, the equation of how to solve a problem of two legitimate competing interests. How do you provide for your family while spending more time with them? This is on the minds of so many young leaders today who are raising young children. When we're not integrated within ourselves, we make a trade-off and we
Mm.
rationalize about our choice. And that creates a lot of inner conflict. When you're integrated within yourself and you've engaged your body and heart, what happens is the choices you're going to make are naturally going to shift on their own. And the
Mm.
solutions that you might not have seen before, all of a sudden start to show up without you having to think about them. So the inner switch process is going to teach you how to become and remain an integrated presence at all times. And the opportunity is to learn to avoid this default habit that so many of us have in our country and our society to overwork ourselves to the point where we become and remain disintegrated. That's the invitation.
I love it. But, I mean, I worked for 22 years in corporate, and I started my own manufacturing business 7 years ago, and I've never felt more integrated than I do today. In other words, when I was with corporate, I was always sort of like doing things that they wanted me to do. Like I was running manufacturing businesses, and so I did my best to put my leadership style on that business, but I was always sort of like, corporate was always pushing things that I didn't agree with necessarily. So I've always felt like I was I wasn't bringing my whole self to work. Like I was like, well, if I want to keep this job, I've got to do what they want to do, even though I don't agree with it, and I can't really push back. So there was a lot of times I felt like I wasn't giving my whole self to work. But when as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I feel like that's gone. Like I don't have anyone above me saying, you got to put a time and attendance system in for salaried employees. Like this, like crazy things like that. Like I don't really think that adds any value to my business, but they're being forced on by corporate. I don't have that problem as much anymore. So as an entrepreneur, I found I'm much more integrated today. My personal life and my professional life are really blended to the point where they're hard to see the difference. And so I think for the first time in my life, I feel integrated, and I didn't necessarily always have that feeling when I work for other people. Do you have any ideas or ways that we can think about it when we're in environments where we can't sort of bring our whole self to work, or we feel like conflict between the way the organization we work for wants to do things and the way we think and know things should be done. Any thoughts on that? Because I know that's something I struggled with in my corporate days.
Oh, it's such a powerful question. You know, my clients typically are, you know, entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs, and presidents of enterprises. And that's for a reason, because
Yeah.
I enjoy working with this population because they are the decision makers.
Yeah. Yeah.
They get, you know, if we resonate and there's a connection and they want to work with me, then we're working together. You know, usually within a few days of a conversation. And because, you know, I'm working with the decision makers and their level one teams, there's an opportunity to help shape and shift that conversation, because that's what they're hiring me to do, right?
Yes.
They're hiring me to help provoke new ways of thinking.
Yeah.
So we don't have to go through layers and layers and layers of agreements and, you know, procurement committees and a whole bunch of people who have lots of restrictions on the ways in which we can work. I think what I would say to anyone is to really look deep within. You know, life is short, and we've all learned that it can change overnight with that pandemic. And to really connect to one's values. And if you're finding that the values that are critical for your well-being are not being met in the current situation in which you find yourself, find another situation.
I agree. That's what I think. I mean, I really wish I had thought that differently. I just always thought, well, that's just the way it is. I'm never going to be in a place where I'm 100% comfortable with, but that's not true. You've got to go. I have a friend of mine named John Brubaker who says, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. And I think that we need, especially in a time now where I think employees have the upper hand in terms of your choice and where you want to go. And there's no stigma attached to having multiple jobs. So if you don't like what you're doing and you feel like your values are in conflict, I agree with you. Move on, find another opportunity where you do feel like you can bring your whole self to work. I really like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
so beautiful when you get to that, you get that clarity and you realize that nothing in your life is worth tolerating being out of sync with your values. Nothing.
I love that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask this because I really like this, and we don't talk about it enough, I think, in leadership. You say loving leaders create connection. And I love that. When I hear the word love and leadership connected, I love it. But tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think it's important to begin to preface it by saying when I say loving leadership, I'm not meaning intimate romantic love or sexual love. That's very important. Very, very important for people to understand. Loving is not in the definition of sexual or romantic intimacy in this context. It is about bringing one's light into the work that you do as a leader and being able to cultivate that and bring that out in those with whom you work. So that loving leadership is about seeing and experiencing the light that every human being has within them, and knowing that you, when you are in the last principle, the illuminate principle, when you have reached that level for yourself, you will be able to cultivate that within others. And when you do, that's when the magic really starts to happen.
I love it. It's interesting because I've had 3 Navy SEAL commanders on this podcast, and all 3 of them have mentioned the word love. And that's how they were successful in the things they did, is they had each other's back, and they cared for the person on the left and the right of them. And it was a deep love that got them through difficult missions and got everybody home. And I think that as a military person, there was definitely that on board a submarine. There was we looking out for your fellow sailor, and it was a bond. It was, again, like I said, I think it was love. We loved each other, cared for each other. We wanted to make sure we got home safely, and I think that carried us through difficult times. And I think that you can bring that to work, and I love that you bring it up in the book.
It's that deep care conversation. I mean, we know that in organizations, people only act if they care.
Yes.
So if we don't get to the level of understanding what people care about, we aren't going to get them to take action, and they're not going to produce results. So it's important that we be able to engage people in the care conversation. And that, in order for people to express what they care deeply about, they need to feel psychologically safe.
Yes.
And they need to feel that there is a sense of someone else seeing their greatness within and inviting them to share that. And that's the love, I think, that you're describing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's great. Well stated. This book is so great, and we've really just kind of, I feel like we scratched the surface on it, but what's one final message you want to leave to the audience about the book that that might be unique amongst other books, and just something, final message you want to leave with everybody?
Yeah. So the value of being an inner switch leader is really extraordinary. We offer an integrated roadmap to help people learn how to alter their difficult relationships from conflict creating, stress inducing, reactive struggles into harmonious, responsive, and joyful collaborations, while enjoying the process of getting where they want to go. And not only will you have better results because you'll be co-creating, innovating, and bringing forth the greatness within everyone with whom you work, you will also be joyful all along the way in getting there, versus the destroying of others, destroying your own energy and destroying the energy of other people in order to, quote unquote, reach the goal. That is no longer tolerable or sustainable. People are just saying no to that. And this roadmap is a new way. I believe it's a way that can transform the way we work and the way we live and the way we lead. And I'm excited to be sharing this message with your listeners and with the wider world. I'm so appreciative of your interest, John.
Yeah, this is such a great book, such an important topic, especially as we, emerge from, a pandemic, and the workplace is shifting and changing. And really, as I was saying earlier, employees have the upper hand right now, and bosses, you got to work hard if you want to keep your best people. And if you want to create an environment where people love to come to work, these are things you got to be working on yourself. You got to get inside if you want to fix the outside. So you got to flip that inner switch. Is that the right terminology?
That's the right terminology. Invest in doing your own work, invest in your own leadership development, because your organization can only achieve in the results what you yourself are willing to do to grow as a leader. When you stop growing, your results are going to show that.
Wonderful. Well said. Susan, how can people find out more about you, your services that you offer, and also this new book?
Yeah. So you can find me on the web at www.susansfreeman.com and at LinkedIn, Susan S. Freeman. I have a very robust website and LinkedIn profile. You could sign up to be on my monthly newsletter list, where I give free tips and tools, as well as announcements of things that I think might be of interest to leaders who are developing. And if you go to my website, there are also links to all your favorite online retailers, the big ones as well as the indies. So we encourage you to purchase the book from whatever feels right for you. I also have at the website offers for leaders and organizations who wish to buy multiple copies of the book. There are generous bulk orders as well as bonuses from me, including virtual sessions with me, team sessions, etc., as part of that, depending upon how many copies of the book you purchase. So that's a great way to get started. You can also email me at susan@susansfreeman.com if you wish to engage in a chat and a discovery conversation. I'm always up for that.
Oh, fantastic. We're going to go ahead and put links in the show notes for all of those resources. Susan, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate the work that you've put into this book. I really like the idea of us going inside, flipping that switch so that we can be better leaders on the outside and within an organization, and create a better environment for our employees and ourselves too. And so instead of trying to struggle with work-life balance, why not bring your whole self to everything that you do? And I love that idea of an integrated, bringing your integrated person to work and to your home life. I think that's a fantastic lesson from this book. Susan, thanks for coming on the show, and I really appreciate everything you shared today.
Thank you, John. It's an honor, and I appreciate all the great work you're doing in the world and the way you're showing up as an integrated leader. It's really very inspiring to me.
Well, thanks again. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.